And at this point, I'd like paid like I said, like all the money I had available to me. And I go in there and they're like, yeah, this looks good. We're like 60% of the way done, like, you know, a month or two more and we'll be like ready to go. And I was like, oh my gosh, like I'm like sitting there trying to keep it cool, but I'm like, I can't pay you anything more.
Welcome to the Inflection Podcast, where we explore the pivotal moments that have shaped us into who we are today. I am your host, Anebi, and I can't wait to dive into these moments with you. Let's get it.
Welcome to this episode of the Inflection Podcast. Super excited to have Ryley Randall with us today. Thank you so much for hopping on board.
Thanks for the invite.
Ryley is the founder, CEO of Devize.
Yep.
And building your company out here in Phoenix.
Yeah.
It's exciting in it. I'm curious what that looks like. I want to look at what it looks like building a software startup out here in the Phoenix area.
Yeah. Well, yeah, Phoenix, it has its pros and cons. Obviously, like Phoenix isn't known for being a startup hub. So
hopefully we change that soon here.
But I mean, I think that's part of why I wanted to build it here was I felt like there was a lot of potential and there was a lot of people who like wished more things were happening here. And so I feel like whenever you build a company, you end up contributing back to the community in some way. So it just sort of felt like if I was going to contribute somewhere, where did I want to do that? And Arizona was home for me, so it made sense to do it here. And
that's cool.
Yeah. So it has, I mean, there's definitely, you know, like sometimes I feel like, man, this would be easier if I was in San Francisco to recruit some more like talent or some just like infrastructure. But the cool thing is that I feel like those who are sort of playing the game that we are playing, you get to know all of them really well. You get a lot of help and everyone seems to feel like, all right, now it's time for Phoenix to actually do something important and grow up a little bit. So it's cool. Yeah.
I've been playing around in the startup ecosystem for the past decade, and I will say I'm a lot more excited about it now. Just there's so much activity, many companies. There's more VC activity as well with funding. So I'm very interested to see how it evolves. And it's companies like yours too that are moving here, you know, setting up shop here and trusting in the ecosystem and actually, you know, growing your companies here. I think like it's really exciting. How does this compare to Utah? Because I think you've also run a company out in Utah before. What does that look like? And it's not a trick question.
Yeah. I mean, Utah has a lot of really good things going for it. I went to school there and that's where a lot of my connections were. So it made sense to start there. Like I said, as we kind of grew and I thought about, like, I realized the more that I was, you know, in addition to building my company, I was like contributing to an ecosystem and what they have going in Utah is great. And I actually feel like it made it really easy for us to start. But it just was a question of like, all right, if I'm going to build my company and, you know, contribute to like this ecosystem, do I really want to stay here? Do I really feel, I went to school there and there's like some family ties and stuff to Utah, but there's, you know, it was never a place where I felt like I really was invested.
Yeah.
And so it just sort of seemed like where like, it was questions around like, you know, who do I really care about and where do I really care about? And so, and I felt like the time was right, sort of what you'd said. I'd always kept tabs on like the Arizona scene. It seemed like not a lot was happening.
Yeah.
But then it seemed like I started to see some signs that I'm like, okay, there's like
some signs of life.
Yeah, there's some positive momentum going on here. And so it would be cool to get there and be like at the forefront of it. And, you know, maybe someday we can look back and realize like, oh yeah, we were able to have like an outsized impact than other would, you know, Utah has a lot of great people. They don't need me, where I feel like Arizona, I have an opportunity to like help more people and potentially make a better impact.
Yeah, no, that's cool. That's cool. One thing that so Devize really intrigues me, your value proposition. So no code, software for founders. But what did that look like, right? Because again, I'm very interested in the stories behind brands, and you know, has it been a series of inflection points getting here where you scratching your own itch? What was that like getting to now with Devize?
Yeah. I mean, this can be a pretty long story.
Yeah,
For the long story. All right, yeah. I feel like Devize started really as a triangulation of a couple things or a few things. And so I would say one was, as you know, I served a mission for my church in West Africa. So I lived in Ghana and Liberia for a year. And while I was there, I like naturally kept having these feelings of like, there has got to be a way to like help more of these people participate in the like global economy that exists now, right? Like,
Yeah.
we're so connected. And the realization, I'm like, this is like what the internet was for, right? Like the whole world's connected now. And even in like, you know, some random village I was in, there was still an internet cafe and you could go,
Wow.
you know, you could still go, you could still get on Google. And there was like, you know, 4G internet and so I sort of had that. So I sort of felt like, all right, I didn't know what it would look like, but I sort of felt like, what is the way to help more people like basically make things for the internet and in some way, like I said, like just play a bigger part in this like global digital economy where it doesn't matter where you live, right? Like if you've got skills and you can do the work, like there's someone who can pay you for it. And then I would say the other piece was like, I've always been very entrepreneurial. And so naturally, like I had lots of ideas and increasingly they became, when I went to college, you know, I had all these ideas and I had this realization that like, man, it seems like every idea I have needs software in some way. And so I would just start trying to find people who can make it for me. And I mean, this is where the story can get long. So I even at one point I had this idea for this like app that I'm like, all right, this is gonna for sure work. I was like, I'd just gotten back from Africa. So I was 21, but like a freshman in college, didn't really know the world works kind of thing. Was sure that like, all right, I can just like build this thing, release it, and like it'll sell itself, whatever. So I hired a local agency to work on a project for me. And we like met before. They like told me what the budget was. I had no money, so I like reworked some student loans where I could like, instead of paying for, I was like, all right, I can like pay basically all. I literally put like not just more than I had, like literally like over what I had because I like took out loans to like pay for this thing. But I was so sure that it would sell. And so I went, like progress was going on. At first it was good. Then I started getting like less updates. I wasn't really sure how things were happening. I was kind of focusing on school too. And then they're like, all right, hey, let's meet on like X date. And I went to this meeting expecting to like have the app done. And at this point I'd like paid like I said, like all the money I had available to me. And I go in there and they're like, yeah, this looks good. We're like 60% of the way done, like, month or two more and we'll be like ready to go. And I was like, oh my gosh, like I don't have, I'm like sitting there trying to keep it cool, but I'm like, I can't pay you anything more. Like, so I'm like sitting there trying to ask them like, what are we going to do here? And so I ended up just like, all right, give me just like, I don't even know how GitHub works at the time. Just like, give me all of the code that you have written and like, I will figure it out. And, yeah, so like I said, I was trying to keep it cool there, but I left and like, I got in my car and I think I sat in my car for like an hour maybe, just like, I think I just screwed up my life. It's funny looking back now because it's like relatively not like that much amount of money, like definitely not enough money where it like ruin your life.
Yeah.
But at the time, I was also like newly married too. So I was like thinking about,
how did that conversation go?
Yeah, no, seriously. I was like sitting there like, how am I gonna like, I had sold my wife on this, like my brand new wife, like on this idea that like, we're gonna be so rich over just like some other software. So I'm like sitting there like, oh, how am I gonna tell that like, hey, yeah, like we're out of money and like this thing doesn't work. And so I think it gave me this like, I don't know, just this like, it was my first experience with building software and realizing like, wow, that was terrible. Like what a terrible experience. And like the agency I worked with, I don't think they necessarily even did anything wrong. Like, yeah, maybe they communicated more. I just didn't ask questions. I didn't know how it worked.
Do you even know what to ask?
I didn't even know what to ask. Like, so I don't even think it was really all their fault. Like looking back now, right? Like I don't necessarily blame them as much as it was just like this big like slap in the face of like, okay, yeah, that really sucked.
Yeah.
And but okay, I was like, how am I going to dig myself out of this hole? So I basically just would set up my laptop on a computer. I'd like go to school, do stuff, and then it was like time to go to bed. My wife would go to bed, and I would just say like, all right, see you later. And I would go sit in his office. I would leave it dark so I had nothing to look at. I would just stare at the screen for as long as I could, just trying to like, and like Googling whatever, and just like, if I stare at this thing long enough, all these like little curly braces and syntax and everything will just start to make sense. And yeah, it turns out if you take that approach after like months of just staring at a screen, they start kind of making sense. And like you start being able to understand like what questions to ask a little bit more, and like looking at Stack Overflow and stuff making sense. Then you can start building things, and like, I was doing like online free courses to try and figure out. I even was like, I wanted to buy a course, but I was like, I can't spend any more money.
Yeah.
And and ChatGPT obviously wasn't a thing, so that would have saved me a lot of time.
Dang it.
I know, a few years too early. But okay, so like, how am I going to build this app? Along this process of like, all right, I'm not a very good developer, I barely know anything. I'm just like trying to figure out the stuff works. I started trying to turn to all of these tools that would like be able to solve some piece of this like application that I wanted to build. So the application was just a way for businesses to get more reviews on Google. So
Yeah.
it was like, the idea was just like, we'll give you a little form that you can just keep open in a tab, and you can enter someone's name and a phone number, and it'll send them a text, leave a Google review.
And then it did a review and it pops up in your Google account.
Yep. Yeah. And it was like a link directly there. And then there were some like other ideas and stuff. But I was like, that's when I discovered like, okay, there's APIs. Okay, there's like some tool that like, I don't have to code the API integration. I can just use like something like Zapier and like build kind of this flow out.
Yeah.
There's like this widget that will let you do like Google searches. So I can kind of use that to let people look up their business or whatever. So I started turning to, I didn't know this terminology really at the time, but I started realizing that, there's this world of these no code tools, and none that were like, so anyways, I started using all these tools to build all of these applications. And along this way, it dawned on me that like, going back to my feelings when I was on my mission in Africa, that like this, like I'm figuring this out. Like it gave me the vision that like, okay, like you can build software without having to write code necessarily, but it was still kind of a clunky process. You had to like be kind of technical. And so, but it wasn't even necessarily about that, like, I was really passionate about no code itself as much as that, like, I just felt like this was an easier, more approachable way to start making things that you could actually like go and sell.
Yeah.
So yeah, that business didn't actually have to work out. Like I built it and it kind of worked, and we actually got a few customers, but along the way, I actually ended up starting an agency where that's what we did. We were kind of like a no-code agency, but we would build apps for people, but like Frankensteining together all of these different like back-end tools to like do something. And like they were kind of slow and clunky, and we got more sophisticated over time. But
amazing.
Anyway, sorry.
That sets the stage perfectly for Devize, right?
Yeah.
Which essentially is like a custom software tool to 10x the way you build, software, and also at a fraction of the cost. So that's very interesting. I want to talk about that from you. What the secret sauce is. So we think about Devize. I hear no code in there. Speed 10x is pretty damn good value prop, and also reduces complexity and also fraction of the cost. So speed, cost, and quality. Obviously, quality software. Like it's always a balance. Trying to usually none of those you have to give on one of those. So it's interesting to hear the value prop of you can get as high on all these levers as possible. So what does that look like for Devize? Like how are you doing that with the one no code tool to rule them all?
Yeah. Well, I would say this is sort of a subtle difference, but I made this point that like We will use the term no code just because people will sometimes have a context of what that means, but we rarely use it internally, nor do we. Our company's mission is to make software 10 times faster to build and 10 times cheaper. But how that actually happens will likely change over the course of us building Devize. Right now, that looks like we have a no-code platform. And so you're asking like, all right, how is it faster? Well, one, I think I bring up this point a lot, but like if you think about, devices for building web apps, the web is like a visual experience, right? Like when software started, it was like all based on a command line and you're like writing text. And then like it was like a textual interface, but then we got a graphical user interface. But then still somehow the way you build these graphical interfaces is by like writing lines of text, which, I mean, it's not exactly, but sometimes I'll use like the joke. Like imagine if you downloaded Photoshop and the way you used Photoshop was saying that like const image equals like writing out code to like, like you're doing a visual work. Like it should be, it doesn't make it visual. But today that's how a lot of web development is, right? Like it's a visual medium, but we're using it through code, and it can be effective. But I think what we do at Devize, that's part of why we're successful, is we've made the visual development matches like what you're building, right? Like it was time to update that too.
You also seem to have like a, would I say, professional services component? Like, you're not just saying, hey, here you go, figure it out. I mean, it's easier, but build it. But I think you still have, if that's your part of your business model, where essentially your team can also build it. So it's not only, hey, we give you a faster, more cost-effective tool, but also, by the way, we can help you build it. So that's very interesting. It's like vertical integration a bit.
Totally. Yeah, I think that I mean, we can talk, I'm sure you'll have more questions about this later, but I think that's one of the things that I had to learn a lot, part of being a founder, is that like, there's different ways you innovate. And like we often think innovating is like just about the product, but there's actually like a lot of different levers you can pull. And like, just like business model is one of those things that I underappreciated. And so frankly, Devize has been tough to build. Like you said, like, how do you balance all three? It's like, well, it's because it's really, really tough. Like actually building a platform where we feel like, hey, you can build faster, it'll be like cheaper to build. Oh, and by the way, like the actual app that runs, where it's going to be like more performant and better than an app that like you went and hired some engineer to write. Like it's actually a really tricky problem to solve. And I think we hit a lot of, and then you like throw on top of it, like, well, it needs to be like user friendly, and you gotta like have like a good UI and UX experience. You gotta have good customer support. Like there's all these, that's what I was talking about. There's like all these different levers you can pull in a business. And so, this change recently was just about, I think, one, a realization for us that like, we need to stop waiting around to like find some magic bullet and like what can we do today to like drive growth in our business? And that was like, all right, well, if we know how to use the tool, so what if we as an option gave people the ability to just let us build it? So the value prop is not like you can build it super fast, but you were going to pay someone to build this for you anyways. You can pay us and we can do it for a fraction of the time, and happens to be a fraction of the cost as well. And it's turned out to work really, really well for us. And I think that's a trend we'll see more. I think we'll start to see a lot more companies and startups where I've seen the phrase on X or Twitter a few times now that like, historically we've all talked about software as a service. And in the future, I think we'll see a lot more software and a service. Like that vertical integration, which I think can be really, really powerful.
Absolutely. I mean, I invested in a few companies, one of them being Radhash, and that's kind of the idea too. It's like it's no longer just a software as a service, but software and service and investor ecosystem where you can sell it. Like it's very interesting, again, thinking along the lines of full vertical integration and ownership over your IP. I mean, able to do without what you want or change your mind, or again, you own it all. So that's very interesting. I think, we'll be seeing a lot more of that, and I'm excited. for it all. There's another question that comes to mind with regards to a lot of the episodes. We end up talking about AI, even though it's not,
Sure.
AI is not the main conversation. But where do you see AI falling into all of this? It could be personally for Devize or even generally in industry. I see people on two ends of a spectrum, or maybe in the middle of bullish on it or like wary of it. Where do you see that fitting in? You mentioned ChatGPT earlier.
Yeah.
That would have helped you a while ago, but what's your posture towards it?
Yeah. I mean, I'm definitely, I think, bullish on it. Like, I think I have personally seen enough and like built enough use cases to where it's like, it'd be impossible to say it's like not incredibly helpful. And like, maybe it is overhyped, but it's definitely like, there is definitely worthy of at least part of the hype that it's getting. But I do think that like where people get wrong right now is the best AI use cases I see are all still keep a human in the loop, right? The idea of this AI is like we're replacing humans, but I've yet to see a really well executed use case where that's actually the case.
It's fully autonomous.
Instead where it's about like, all right, what if we could just give this human, it's the word superpowers gets used a lot, but, so it's like, all right, we have a company we spend a lot on customer support. The idea is let's try and see if we can make it more efficient with AI. The solution is not let's build a chat bot and like our customers can chat with us whatever. The solution is, what if we built a tool for our customer support agents? So when a new message comes in, they can automatically pulls up the relevant text. It can generate a response that the person can just like proofread and like edit if they need to, and then send it out, which is like a sort of a difference. And it's a difference in what part of the problem you are solving.
Yeah.
But I think for right now, the models they will get better. And so like all of this advice it will change as stuff gets better. But that's what excites me, is not like this idea of AI versus humans, and more instead of like, what can humans do with AI? And like, how can we take all these tasks that are historically just like long, monotonous, boring, and like don't require that like human spark of like creativity that makes work exciting? How can we leverage AI to speed all that stuff up so we can all focus on the things we really like doing and are much more higher leverage? And so that's my take on it.
Yeah. I was chatting with someone, that was also the verdict, where AI essentially becomes more like an amplifier. So for those who are already doing good work, there'll be wide years ahead of those who are already struggling. Right. So it's like with AI, right, you can get a lot more done in a shorter amount of time, or improve processes, or remove the mundane stuff, so you could focus on the strategic levers. So that's kind of how I see it as well. With AI, I've used so many AI tools for design and whatnot, and many times it's good for a first draft, and I iterate it, or you have a first draft, it sprinkles some pixie dust in it, and then you work on that. But barely often have I seen where it's the whole enchilada AI takes. And essentially I'm just like, all right, take finished product, use. There's still human, at least in my experience, human in the loop for quality control or adding more creativity to it or something.
And I would say, I feel like that's where most AI products need to improve. Is it your part that like it's good for first draft, then I need to iterate? I have found like the biggest challenge is, and I think about like, and this is part of this is coming from our experience with Devize, but it's not like it's really cool to say like, get the first draft, but then how do you actually iterate afterwards? And I feel like a lot of products, that's where they fall short, is it's like, you can do something to generate an image, and then your next prompt is like, all right, but like, just tweak it a little bit. So you're getting like something totally different back. Where you almost feel like, I'd like to generate an image, and then, at that point, I actually kind of want to like convert back into like a non-AI tool where I can like, these were all separate layers, and I can like drag and move them around. And so I'm excited to see how more and more AI tools like adopt that approach, where absolutely be a lot more iterative and see what those workflows look like.
100%. I'm very keen. I'm always experimenting with them, and we'll see. It's always a new kid on the block.
Yeah.
There's a new one to use. There's some that are really, it's nice to like seeing the advancement in models. It seems like it's taking shorter and shorter amounts of time to train them and bring out more sophisticated models. So
Yeah.
we see where it goes with that. Well, one thing to like with building companies, right? Communities are a big aspect of that. Whether communities you're part of to help, or building a community around your product to help it, thrive. Some products have been able to get into the build like a cult following and communities grow with you no matter what. So, AI tools seem to have that. There are people who are early adopters of Midjourney, for example, and just stuck with it and followed all the iterations. For Devize, like, what has that looked like? We talk about community from the perspective of communities that have helped you as a founder and founding team, but also what does it look like cultivating community around your product?
Yeah, that's a great question. And frankly, I don't know. I feel like this is an area where at Devize we are still. I would say we need to improve, but also like I think we're still thinking through how we really want this to play out. I'll speak from my experience, though. I mentioned my experience of trying to learn to code. And I got pretty active in a lot of online communities, a lot of no-code communities, a lot of communities about learning how to code. And those are frankly like probably the biggest help, because you had these other people who are either trying to solve a similar problem, and you felt like we're all like fighting back against who even knows what together, but like, we're all helping each other out. And it can be a pretty special experience when you feel like you can get connected with like something you really care about, with people that are like really helping you. And so that, now going to Devize, I think that's part of why we're being so careful about it. Is I think it can be really easy now that communities are so common, that there's people who just like, they see community and like really what they see is like, oh, this is an opportunity for me to like promote my business and get more work, whatever. And so a lot of it has been, how do we make a community that's like really authentic in helping people, and really authentic, and like there's like, we were asking the questions like, okay, what does it mean to be a part of our community? Why do people actually want to be a part of it? And how do we, like, what mechanisms do we put in place so that it doesn't just become like a de facto job board, or just like, every other post is just like some self-promotion, or, which a lot of communities get into, right? Like, I think you saw that quite a bit in like the crypto community, because like it was literally money. So, right? Like, it was like, okay, I'm going to be here not because like I'm going to post as many times in this Discord channel, not because I really like care about the mission of this token, but like I'm making some bet that if I do that, I'll get some airdrop, and then like, I can make some like easy money 8 months down the line.
It's like more exploitative and self-aggrandizing. And I think that makes me think of the currency for community, in my opinion, is like value.
Totally.
As a community, you want to just see, if you're creating a community or curating a community, giving value to the members, but also I think you want the kinds of members who are coming there not just to get value, but also to give value. So I see value as like a primary currency. And that's something, so LinkedIn is still one of the social media platforms that is very much so, for professionals, but increasingly you see a lot of the self-serving posts and things like that, or someone sends you a DM or a connect request, you connect with them, and the next thing you're saying is like, hey, you want to buy my stuff? It's like, I just met you. And that's very off-putting for a lot of folks. I wrote out a community called LinkedIn Guild, and the idea for LinkedIn Guild is, hey, community for LinkedIn nerds, by LinkedIn nerds, that is authentic, where we're just learning how do we grow. I've been able to build a brand on there, and there are many others who've done the same. And can we just geek out about the algorithm, what we're seeing, what works, fun things we're finding on LinkedIn, maybe Easter eggs or whatever, and sharing that with the community. So it's been a lot of fun, like getting that going and exploring different platforms, because it's not just what the community is, also it's where It is.
Yeah.
So it's been fun, like figuring all of that out for multiple communities, including LinkedIn Guild. So yeah, it's a hard one. Figuring out the value you're offering and how to bring in folks who actually add value to the community.
Yeah. And I feel like there's a risk too, because you kind of, I mean, like things don't work out, but you really, like you said, it's like value. You sort of feel like, all right, if we're going to do it, then we're going to really lean into this, and we're going to, like, this needs to be something that actually does provide a lot of value gets given, and it like becomes a big part. Like the big risk is if you kind of approach it like lukewarm, and especially early on, I feel like communities, like they take a lot of work and a lot of stoking to like all communities take on a culture. Like it takes a lot of kind of work to prune it into like the way you want it to be. And so, I think that's part of the like, it's like the exciting part, but also like the risky part that you're like, if I started and you're kind of like lukewarm about it, then it just turns into this weird thing where people are like, why did I join this? Like, is it still active? Like, like I've been a part of a lot of communities where I'm like, is this still a thing I should, like as soon as people have questions of like, is this still a thing I like, it's worth my time? Then it's like a quick,
absolutely.
a quick death to the community.
It made me think of the 1% rule. A friend, Joel, was telling me about this, but the 1% rule, right? It's like in communities, online communities, or maybe even physical communities, maybe it translates into that, like about 1% of folks who create the most amount of content.
Yeah.
So your first 1%, very, very, everyone in your community is important, but like even those more so. Yeah. Because if 1%, you want that 1% that are active and engaged, because usually communities, they're just serial lurkers who come in there, just look at stuff, they don't engage, consume, which is fine. That's invariably what will happen. But it's like, how do you get that 1% of folks who are engaged? Because they will create majority of the content and the value generated.
And the tone, right? Like some communities, you're like, oh yeah, this is a place. Like, it's just, you get into a community, you can see like, okay, this is a place where we use lots of emojis, or, like memes are an acceptable like post here, where other times you're like, oh no, it's like,
you can't have too many memes.
All good communities should. But I'm just saying, like the tone, it's just like early 1% that I feel like set a lot of the tone of like how every other person who will come in and ends up being like a contributor, like how they, the kinds of things they'll post and like how they think about it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, totally.
What would you say is one thing you would do differently if you were to go back again, start Devize? What would you do differently?
Just one?
Yeah. Oh, you could say several, maybe a few, but
no, I'm only because startups are great for a lot of reasons, but I think one of the thing I didn't appreciate the most would be how much like personal growth it would require for me to just like start a company from like nothing. And so I often joke that like, if you've ever wondered what it's like to punch yourself in the face, like just do a startup, because it feels like every other week I feel like, something will happen and I feel like, wow, this is terrible. Like, how did this happen? Who did this? And you realize like, me, I did it. I did it myself when I made some dumb choice 6 months ago. And here it is now, like, I just, like, punched myself in the face.
It's a good analogy.
So, I mean, there's, like, a million things that I would do differently. I think the overall arching theme, though, would be I would have been much more focused on bringing in customers much earlier on. Like, I think there is a mistake. I was the worst offender. I've probably made every startup mistake you could possibly make. And the fact that we're still alive is like, I don't know, but I think just because like, we were refusing to give up. But like, especially earlier on, people, like about to start a product and someone asks you like, oh, who's your customer? I think we tend to like answer that question with an ICP, like, oh, we're like small businesses who need custom software, whatever. It's like, no. When you're like first starting out and someone says, who's your customer? It should be like, it is John. Like, I should know who that person is as much as possible. And maybe even, like your first 10. I think if you're starting out and someone says like, who's your customer? And you don't have like 3 names in the top of your head. I think it's a sign, at least for me, that like I should have been spending much more time with those customers, and then finding ways, like, I think we get fixed, at least I did, on like the solution that you want and not in the problem that you have. And so
essentially like a solution, a hammer looking for a nail.
yes,
Okay.
yeah, a common, and in our case, it took a really long time to build this hammer, where I think I instead could have thought, all right, well, these are the customers we're building a hammer for. There are other ways to provide value to them. What are something I can do in a much shorter amount of time to like solve their problems, and think about it through the lens of like creating value and not creating a solution, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I think that would have changed a lot of our product decisions. It would have changed how we run as a company. I think it would have done a lot to help us not get punched in the face as many times as we have.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that. For those listening, what are good ways to engage with Devize?
Yeah, good question.
Good.
I mean, the obvious one is if you run a business and feel like, hey, we've been wanting to build some kind of software for our business, then hopefully you'll at least look at us. I think we have a pretty strong offer in the sense that, like, we're often fractions of the price and we can do things much quicker. But the other one that may be more, I don't know, maybe more applicable is, we've talked about this, is we are having a lot more partners that we work with, like other small businesses who either do marketing or they'll do like SEO or they'll do videography for businesses. And they hear or come across the need for custom software. And so it's really been fun to partner with businesses in that way, in sort of like a partnership and referral way, where we can basically either like white label or offer our services through them.
Yeah.
So I only bring that up because a lot of times someone's like, well, I don't need custom software, but
You might know.
you might know someone, and there might be a way that you can, like, it can help it could help your business by reaching out. So
Absolutely. And we'll add some of these to the show notes too.
Sweet, yeah.
And your link and social profiles. But thank you so much,
yeah, of
Ryley,
course,
for
it's fun.
coming on board.
Yeah, thank you, appreciate it. Yeah.